Hello, everyone. Welcome back to From the Dark Side. I'm your host, Sherry. Today, we've got a case from 2010 in Dunwoody, Georgia. A 36-year-old, seemingly normal guy is gunned down in broad daylight in a preschool parking lot. He had just dropped his son off moments before. At first, everyone thought this was a robbery or a random attack, but that wasn't the case at all. This is episode 173, The Case of Rusty Sneiderman. We're heading back to 2010. It's hard to believe that 2010 was 15 years ago. The Affordable Care Act was signed into law by President Barack Obama. Angry Birds debuted in the Apple Store and within 10 months had 42 million downloads. It was the 100th anniversary of the Boy Scouts of America. Popular women's clothing style were leather leggings. I would know this because I owned about 50 pairs. And in bizarre news from 2010, China's traffic jam from hell. A traffic jam on the Beijing-Tibet Expressway lasted more than 10 days. How does that even happen? People were just living out of their cars and vendors were walking up and selling food at their windows. On November 18th, 2010, this was an unseasonably warm day for mid-November in the town of Dunwoody, Georgia. 36-year-old Rusty Sniderman drove his son to preschool and he walked him inside. He said his goodbyes and he gave his son a hug, telling him he hoped he had a great day. He said goodbye to the teachers and walked back out to his car. He hadn't made it very far when someone approached him and began firing. Rusty was shot 4 times execution style. He died shortly afterwards. The workers inside the preschool quickly made sure there was no children near the window and they led them to safety. Multiple calls to 911 came in. This is broad daylight and a busy preschool with businesses all around. Witnesses spotted the shooter get in a silver minivan and drive away. A witness, Chris Lang, told ABC's 2020, "It was so surreal, the experience, in that there was no chaos or running or yelling or anything. He just walked back to his van. It didn't look like what I think a murder would be. Everyone thinks they know what you do. You don't." Who was this killer, and why would he want to kill Rusty? Rusty Sniderman was born in Cleveland, Ohio on June 18, 1974, to parents Donald and Marilyn. He has a brother named Stephen. Rusty grew up very proud of his Jewish faith. His parents were involved in the community and they raised Rusty and Stephen to be active in all different kinds of programs within their community as well. Family and friends say Rusty was bright, competitive, and quick to take leadership roles, even as a young kid. He played sports, he loved numbers, and he had a lot of energy. If there was a school project or a youth group event, Rusty was right there volunteering, leading, or competing. After his high school graduation, Rusty enrolled at Indiana University. He took accounting and finance courses. He also found something else at the University of Indiana. He met his future wife, Andrea. Andrea shared his Jewish faith and his drive for overachieving. She was the exact same way. Andrea was majoring in computer information systems. She was tech savvy and ambitious, just like Rusty. They met through social circles at Jewish events and the college and around town. They were 2 very sharp, motivated students who enjoyed talking about their futures, and they seemed to have the same exact ambitions. By the time graduation came, they were a full-on couple. They married on December 30th, 2000. Everyone who knows this couple says that they got along great. They seem madly in love and they really built a good life for themselves. Rusty isn't done with school yet. He applied to a bunch of business schools and he got accepted by Harvard in one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the world. There he earned his master's in business administration. Rusty's friends from college remembered him as confident, ambitious, and passionate. By 36 years old, he had multiple titles: certified public accountant, certified financial planner, chartered life underwriter, and personal financial specialist. This guy knew money better than anyone. After Harvard, Rusty worked at a few different places. Financing and consulting were his area. He and Andrea moved through different cities before settling in Dunwoody, Georgia, which is a really nice suburb right outside of Atlanta. They really liked this town because it was just a few minutes from Atlanta, so if they wanted to go into a big city, they were right there. And there was also a big Jewish community center in town. By the late 2000s, Rusty and Andrea had built what looked like the American dream. They have this beautiful $1 million home in Dunwoody. They had 2 children, a daughter named Sophia and a son named Ian. Rusty was now reading bedtime stories, volunteering, and making time between all these work commitments to be with his family. He also continued his community involvement just like he did when he was a child. He served with nonprofits like the Autism Society of Georgia. Those who knew him described him as a man who handled his career really well. He was a busy executive, but was still able to be strongly committed to his family and his community. Andrea's career was also doing well. She is working at GE as a quality systems manager. The way she got this job was she was in a book club, and one woman mentioned her husband, Hemi Newman, worked at GE. You should talk to him. He's the general manager, and he's looking for a few positions, she told her. Andrea was interviewed, and Hemi really liked her and thought she would make a good fit. She was hired at $120,000 a year, which is really good for the mid-2000s. It still is today, but back in the mid-2000s, this was really good income. At the time of our story, Rusty is unemployed, but he's never really unemployed. He's taking care of his children every day while Andrea was at work and off taking business trips. Rusty is an entrepreneur. He's got all these different projects he's working on. He was building apps and doing all this side work and consulting. Plus, we have to remember, Rusty is a good finance guy. He has a ton of money in the bank. They had just purchased a second house on a lake. They have a new boat. They have enough savings to live on for many years if they need to. Rusty is looking for another job, but he's in a position where he doesn't have to settle for the first one that comes along. He has enough put away not to worry about anything for a while. As well, Rusty may just start his own company at this point. He's worked for plenty of other folks and thought maybe it was time for him to have his own company. To neighbors, friends, and everyone else, the Sneidermans were a young, busy, successful family. But in the fall of 2010, they had some weird stuff going on. According to author Michael Fleeman, in October 2010, just a month before our story takes place, Rusty and Andrea were upstairs in their master bedroom when they heard the garage door open. They both looked at each other and Andrea screamed. No one had a garage door opener except the two of them, and they're right there in front of each other upstairs, so it has to be an intruder. They called 911, and when the police came out, they saw nothing was taken. No one entered the house. The police determined it may have been a glitch, and maybe a neighbor had the same exact garage door and was programming the garage door opener, and it just so happened to open the Sneiderman's garage instead. Just a couple weeks later, something more disturbing happened. Andrea would take their 5-year-old daughter to school. Rusty would take their 3-year-old son to pre-K at a preparatory school. This is what they do 5 days a week. Andrea and the little girl are already gone this morning, like usual. Rusty is putting his son in his car seat. He thinks he smells natural gas. This is bad because if his gas line is leaking, it could cause an explosion or they could get sick. Nothing good comes out of a leaking gas line. Rusty puts his son in the car seat and goes around to the side of the house where his gas meter is, and he's startled to see a man there. The man was laying on the ground face down. Yeah, I'd be freaking out too. Rusty asks him, "What are you doing here?" Then the man takes off and runs towards the woods. Rusty calls police and tells them about this man on his property that he saw, and he saw that he had a gun in the back of his pants, and Rusty makes it clear he does not want him back here on his property again. They take a report and the gas company comes out and inspects the lines. Since nothing was taken and nothing damaged, they couldn't do anything. Just call us if he comes back. Friends say Rusty seemed unsettled but not paranoid. He didn't know who might be watching him or why someone would be doing this. These incidents, although they were small and isolated, made him wonder if they were connected somehow. On the morning of November 18th, 2010, Andrea takes Sophia to school before she heads to work. Rusty takes Ian to pre-K. The pre-K school was in a busy traffic area. The United States Postal Service was right across the street. There's a Dunkin' Donuts and all kinds of businesses around this preschool, and people are out on this busy fall morning. Rusty pulls his silver Infiniti G35 into the parking lot just like he does 5 days a week. Today he has an important meeting with a potential business partner, so he's got a busy morning. He takes Ian out of his car seat and walks him inside. After he says his goodbyes, he walks back to his car. A silver minivan had pulled up next to him. The driver gets out and pulls a gun from his coat and shoots Rusty 4 times in the chest. Witnesses were out during this time. There was a small line of people waiting for the post office to open. A flood of calls came into 911. A man who is a chiropractor heard the gunshots and ran towards the school. He checked Rusty's pulse and it was very weak, but he was still breathing. A pediatrician who had an office across the street comes running over and he attempts CPR but says he thinks it's too late. Rusty would pass away shortly after this. He was 36 years old. When police arrive, witnesses tell them that the shooter was between 5'9" and 5'11". He was average build. He was not black, but definitely not white. He may have been Hispanic or Middle Eastern. But one thing that stood out is they both said he had a black beard, but it didn't appear to be natural. It looked like a costume prop. They say that after he shot Rusty, he casually walked back to the silver van. He got in and peeled wheels out of the parking lot and into a lane and blended in with the rush hour traffic. So one of the teachers at Ian's pre-K calls Andrea at work. She tells her something happened, you need to get here now. She won't tell her what happened because she wanted her to get there safely. She won't tell her if it's about her son or anything, just that we have an emergency, you need to get here. Andrea gets in the car and drives to the school. She's making lots of calls during this drive. She calls her best friend, her brother, her parents, Rusty's parents. She tells them all something happened to Rusty. Well, who said anything about Rusty? No one. Why would Andrea tell people something terrible happened to Rusty? She shouldn't know at this point. When she gets to the school, they won't tell her anything either. Andrea said she didn't know that he had been shot until she got to the hospital. Police wondered if this could have been a random act of violence. It definitely wasn't a robbery. Nothing was taken out of Rusty's car, and he still had his wallet in his back pocket. They thought maybe it could have been an anti-Semitic attack since Rusty was Jewish. They came to the conclusion that this was definitely a targeted hit, with Rusty being the intended target. They arrive at Andrea and Rusty's home later that day with a search warrant. Andrea's parents answered the door. Her mother told police, "We are a house in mourning," and that they couldn't come in. The officer tells them that they have a search warrant and need to let them in or they'd go to jail for obstruction of justice. His supervisor was there and said they would just come back tomorrow. It's not really a great thing to let people know you've got a search warrant because that could give them time to destroy evidence, but he's the boss, so he would know better than me. As always, the police want to start with the people closest to the victim and then work their way out. So the first person they want to talk to is Rusty's spouse. They get Andrea in a room, and this first interview was intended to gather information about Rusty's background, his personal life, and any possible conflicts that could have led to his murder. Tell us everything about him. During this first meeting, Andrea appeared distraught and shocked. She told investigators that she could not think of anyone who would want to harm her husband. She described Rusty as a devoted father, a successful businessman, and someone with no known enemies. When they asked about his work and personal relationships, Andrea said he was well liked by everyone. Andrea insisted that her family life was happy and her marriage was good. She told investigators that she and Rusty were not experiencing any marital problems. They asked her if it was possible Rusty was having an affair. Maybe some woman's husband found out and wanted revenge. But Andrea says no, she doesn't believe Rusty was cheating on her. Andrea takes lots of business trips, so she's not home a lot of the time, but she still doesn't believe Rusty would do something like that. They ask if there's anyone possibly interested in her. Maybe someone was deeply in love with Andrea and wanted Rusty out of the picture. Andrea said there was one person who showed interest. Her boss, Hemi Newman. Remember, Hemi's wife was in a book club with Andrea and introduced the two. That's how Andrea got this good job. Andrea says Hemi, who is almost 50 years old, asked her out a few times, but she says she made it clear to him that she was married, he was married, his feelings for her weren't going to go anywhere. She wasn't interested. That's the end of it. They jot this down and will come back to it later if needed. During the search of their home, detectives come across a document, and it was one of the things that they had been looking for. A copy of Rusty's $2 million life insurance policy. All of his assets, his money in the bank, their house, and this $2 million would go to Andrea. This isn't surprising to me. Rusty was the finance guy. Of course, he's going to have this huge policy. Meanwhile, Andrea puts up a $10,000 reward for anyone who can identify Rusty's killer. The police check into Rusty's former employer since the two had a falling out. Rusty was the chief financial officer, and he resigned after he uncovered some shady stuff going on. What that was, I have no idea, but it was enough for Rusty to leave his position. The company owners were interviewed and cleared. They also checked into some of Rusty's clients. Rusty was in charge of a lot of people's life savings. Is it possible he ruined someone's stockpile of wealth? Maybe he made some gambling moves in the stock market and caused someone to lose all their money. They checked with former clients and they were cleared. Rusty was good at wealth management and nothing like this had occurred. A month after Rusty's murder, they got a big break in this case. They go back to the surveillance footage from outside the preschool and were able to determine that the van the killer drove was a 2011 Kia Sedona. This is a brand new van. Remember, it's only 2010 right now. Because the footage was grainy, they didn't know it was a Kia at first. They went to Ford dealerships, Dodge, Honda, asking and showing a photo, but it wasn't until they went to Kia that they were told this is a 2011 Kia Sedona. According to reporting by ABC's 2020, they learned that this particular silver Kia Sedona, these were very hard to come by. Only 1,000 of them in the entire United States. They narrowed down that only 13 of them were registered in the state of Georgia, so this is getting even better. They called all these people. All of them have alibis. None were in Dunwoody, Georgia. I feel bad for folks like this who get involved involuntarily. I'm sure they cooperated and it wasn't a big deal, but imagine if they were in Dunwoody, Georgia that day visiting family or something like that. Side note, when we bought my SUV back in December, it was brand new, and the salesman told us that this was a rare model and the only one in the 3 surrounding states at the time. Of course, we did our homework to see if we could find a better price somewhere, and sure enough, there were no other ones available anywhere around. It's not the make and model that makes it unique, but the add-on package that it came with. Anyway, I hope no one in my area commits a crime in one of these, because I will surely be questioned. So police play the surveillance video from the preschool on a big TV screen. And something that stands out is on the front windshield of this minivan. They see 2 stickers. one on the top left and one on the top right. They were offset from each other, almost like they were applied incorrectly. They immediately realize this is a rental car. They drive to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and sure enough, all the cars in the lot have those two barcode stickers on each side of the front windshield. They find the Enterprise lot in North Georgia that rents this particular 2011 Kia Sedona, and there it is, just sitting in the lot. The two windshield stickers were offset just like in the video. This is like Christmas morning to the detectives working on this case. So they process the van, but others have been driving it because it's been 2 weeks since Rusty was murdered. Kids have been in the back seat. It had a lot of people in and out of it. Plus, it's going to be harder to get evidence since the van gets cleaned after each use. But the employees must not have vacuumed very well because the crime scene techs find synthetic fibers. These synthetic fibers are consistent with a costume beard. Remember, the witnesses said this beard looked fake. It looked like something you could get at Spirit Halloween. So who rented this van around November 18th, 2010 is the important question. The Enterprise manager pulls up his computer and makes a few clicks and tells them it was rented by a man named Hemi Newman. Hemi Newman. They know this name. This was the man Andrea said was her boss who had hit on her a few times and she declined. So Hemi is asked to come in and is appalled that he is being asked to sit and talk with these folks. He can't believe they think he's a possible suspect. He's freaking out when they read him his Miranda rights because he's being treated like a criminal. This guy is an executive with a nice title, and he sure is acting like one right now. He even took his iPad into the interrogation room. Police Chief Billy Grogan told ABC's 2020 that it's not every day that you have the operations manager from GE sitting in the police station being questioned about a homicide. Typically, it's guys with long rap sheets. Hemi begins asking, "Am I in any trouble? Do I need a lawyer?" Sergeant Cordellino tells him, "I don't know, do you? That's what we're here to find out." Hemi is saying there is no reason for him to be a suspect, so they turn up the heat a little bit because they're not getting anywhere playing nice cops. They tell him that they have his van that he rented on video speeding away from the crime scene. After 5 hours of back and forth, Hemi finally admitted he rented a 2011 Kia Sedona that day. He says he didn't have anything to do with Rusty's murder and he feels like he's being implicated. At that point, Hemi is asked to stand up and turn around. The van was all they needed to arrest him for the murder of Rusty Sneiderman. So this is great, but police know they need a whole lot more evidence to prove he's guilty and have a jury convict him of the murder. They need to figure out what drove someone like Hemi Newman to commit this act. Powerful executives don't usually go around buying costume beards and pulling a gun out in a preschool parking lot. There has to be more to this story, and police want to get to the bottom of it. There's only one connection between these two men. Rusty's wife, Andrea, worked under Hemi at GE. Hemi says the two are just friends. He says he finds her attractive, and he did indicate that to her, but that's it. He's just her boss. They go to Andrea's house and tell her an arrest had been made and it was her boss. She's like, "No way, you're kidding. Oh my God." They tell her Hemi remains adamant that he didn't pull the trigger, but they have all this evidence stacked against him. There's one thing that they don't have that they really need to get their hands on, and that's the murder weapon. So they dig into Hemi's phone records and found he had communicated with someone who had a gun for sale. They meet with the seller, and he was really helpful. He had a shell casing that belonged to the gun that he sold Hemi. Sure enough, it was a match to the one found near Rusty's body. Hemi had purchased this gun on October 31st, just 3 weeks before Rusty was killed. Investigators learned that Hemi and Andrea had lots of communication on their phones. They were constantly in touch, not just the simple work-related stuff. They were going back and forth every day, allegedly even before and after Rusty's murder. They also had alleged communication before and after the weird incidents at Rusty's house. But all of this communicating stopped the day after the homicide. They learned the two had all these business trips together, some even out of the country. Police tracked down a bartender who said she saw them dining together, and it definitely didn't seem like a business dinner. He was twirling her around, and they appeared to be a newlywed couple. This seems to give the vibe that they were possibly having an affair, but according to Andrea, Hemi had a crush on her, and that was it. She declined his advancements to her. But according to prosecutor Anna Cross, she said, quote, "This was a relationship that was flowers, wine, and travel. There was sex. They were lovers." In February 2012, Hemi is going to go to trial. His defense team shocked everyone when they came out and declared that yes, Hemi shot Rusty, because up until this point he had said he wasn't guilty, but now he's saying he did it. But what else was surprising was that they said Hemi Newman was not responsible because he was insane. A psychologist for the defense said that she examined Hemi and he had undiagnosed bipolar disorder with psychosis. According to reporting by ABC News, this psychologist claims that Hemi believed in his mind that he was rescuing Andrea and that her children were really his and they had to be saved from Rusty. Hemi claims that he had an angel and a demon who talked to him in his mind. The angel looked like Olivia Newton-John and the demon looked like Barry White. Poor Barry White and Olivia Newton-John getting dragged into this. This reminds me of episode 118, the case of Amy Carlson. Remember, she said she had Robin Williams living in her mind. Anyway, demon Barry White came to him and told him he had to kill Rusty and save Andrea and his children. In an article I found from Jacksonville.com in 2012, Hemi's wife Ariella says Hemi is faking this sickness and it's all part of his game. The prosecution is like, nice try. They described Hemi as a very successful executive who knew right from wrong. He managed 3,000 people at GE. He also went to gun shows and target practice in the months leading up to the killing. He rented a van. This is premeditated. Andrea takes the stand and says that she did not act on her boss's advances. She was loyal to Rusty. But emails and texts and witness sightings showed she wasn't being truthful. The jury didn't buy Hemi's claims of mental illness. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life without parole. Okay, so there's still this burning question that's on all of our minds, especially the state's attorney. Did Andrea Sneiderman conspire with Hemi to have Rusty killed? It's the million-dollar question. Andrea denies that she had an affair with Hemi, but the evidence shows otherwise. Rusty's brother, Stephen, said after Hemi's conviction, "Our family has long suspected Andrea's involvement in Rusty's death. It's clear to me that Andrea is covered in Rusty's blood and there are not enough rabbis in the world to wash away those sins." Andrea was charged with murder, lying under oath, and multiple other charges. The state froze the $2 million payout that Andrea was set to receive from Rusty's life insurance. But the murder charge eventually was dropped because they couldn't find any evidence directly tying her to the murder. Think her DNA in the van or a text message to Hemi planning the murder. They couldn't find any evidence. But she lied in court, and that in its own is a pretty big deal. Because the murder charge was dropped, Andrea was able to collect the $2 million in Rusty's life insurance. Andrea pleaded with the judge during her trial. She wanted to be released from house arrest to visit her husband's grave, but then she withdrew the request. At sentencing, she's hyperventilating and begging the judge to show her mercy. He sentenced her to 5 years in prison for lying under oath, but she was released after only serving 22 months. Andrea has been out of prison since 2014. She actually told a friend in a recorded jailhouse call that there should be a movie made about her and the trial, and that Sandra Bullock could play her, but she noted that Sandra Bullock may be too old by now. Once her parole ended in 2017, her record was expunged because she was a first-time offender. So Miss Andrea has a clean record today, like none of this ever happened. So did Andrea conspire with Hemi to have Rusty killed, or is she just guilty of having an affair and doesn't have anything to do with his murder? Or did she not have an affair and she still doesn't have anything to do with his murder? I will link a poll on Spotify because I'm dying to know you guys' thoughts. Let's do a Where Are They Now? Hemi Newman is spending the rest of his life in prison. He looks a lot different than he used to in his most recent court appearances. Hemi's ex-wife and children haven't visited him since 2010. This came from articles from years ago, so obviously this situation could have changed by now. Andrea Sniderman, so I know she goes by her maiden name now. She has been out of prison since 2014 after serving only 22 months. She finished her parole in 2017. I read that she works as a private tutor. Her home that she shared with Rusty sold for $900,000. We also know she was the sole beneficiary of Rusty's $2 million life insurance policy. She says not a day goes by that she doesn't miss her husband. I don't know where Rusty and Andrea's two kids are today. They are teenagers. I did read an article that stated Rusty's parents were suing to get visitation with the kids because Andrea wouldn't allow them to see them. Dunwoody, Georgia has a population of 51,000 residents. This is considered a very affluent town to live in. There's hardly any crime. Rusty's murder really shook this place up since no one believed something like that could happen here. There was concern about what this kind of high-profile case does to community trust. A preschool should be the safest place in the world. Rusty is buried at Arlington Memorial Park in Fulton County, Georgia. I'll end with what is inscribed into his headstone. The quintessential family man with unrestrained love for his wife, children, family, and friends. He was selfless, authentic, genuine, generous, passionate, and optimistic about life. While making his own success, he constantly elevated others along the way. His ferocious intellect and love of learning allowed him to dream big and yet be humble about his accomplishments. We will always remember his infectious smile, huge heart, and constant hope for the future. Rusty was one in a million. He will always be our eternal daddy and soulmate. He believed everything was possible for himself and his family. He raised two children that will forever carry and forward his unfulfilled dreams and legacy. May his soul achieve peace and contentment. Rest in peace to Rusty Sniderman, who didn't deserve to die at 36 years old in a parking lot on a November day back in 2010. He was a son, a brother, a husband, a father. He was generous and bright. He had a lot of accomplishments and a family that he adored. That's it for this week, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, and much love to you all.